Are we obsessed with the offensive line and too dramatic about Nebraska's portal moves? Somebody says we are. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
All right, here we go. Friday mailbag show. I am Connor Happer from 1620 The Zone in Omaha, and Mitch Sherman from The Athletic is with us. As we do weekly, and we'll do these shows on Friday now, we'll solicit your questions. We will ask you for not money or anything like that, just questions. And so
we're not going to ask for money. Okay.
Well, I don't know. Maybe we will at some point. No guarantees. But right now, just questions. And so we got a few. Whoa, hold on. We got a few. As my camera goes haywire there. And so we start with what Mitch teased. And we have Greg, who commented into the YouTube over the last couple of days. He says that we are becoming difficult to listen to, and we are obsessed with the offensive line and generally over dramatic about everything. The last two recruiting classes have included the best offensive line haul in years. I get that a couple tackles might be necessary to bridge the gap, but I also believe that Nebraska is sitting good with young linemen. So this brings in the question, are we being too dramatic about the offensive line?
I don't dispute the fact that Nebraska's sitting well with young offensive linemen. There are a number of offensive linemen in the program that have promise. And what I will say about Nebraska's last couple of classes of offensive linemen is that they've stayed with the program, which is the first thing that you hope for as you build depth and starting talent on the offensive line. That class in 2023, the first one that Matt Rhule signed, the players who've been in the program for 2 years. You're talking about Gunnar Gatula, who elevated himself to starting level in his second year. And then it's Sam Sledge, it's Brock Knutson, it's Tyler Kanak, who was a transfer. It's Jason Machachak, who started as a defensive lineman and has moved over to the offensive line. And those guys are around. What would I say about that group other than Gatula? I think the jury is still out. And the reason, and then if you want to look at the group from last year, Grant Bricks, Landon Davidson, Jake Peters, Gibson Pyle, Preston Taumua, they're all still in the program too. So that's an excellent sign. They're not ready to be starters. I would say all of them I would put in that category with the exception of Gatula. And Nebraska had 5 offensive linemen at the end of the year who it trusted to play football. 2 of them, Ben Scott and Bryce Benhart, are gone via graduation. So have we been dramatic? Have we acted like it was a very big deal for Nebraska to have to recruit players out of the transfer portal? And the fact that we were well into January until this wonderful Wednesday for Nebraska where it got Elijah Pritchett to commit, and the Huskers had still not found an offensive lineman to say yes to their seemingly sizable NIL offer. I think it was probably on point to be somewhat dramatic about that. Connor?
Yeah. I mean, it's I feel like I'm always the person who's telling people to we watch the football games, and I do on the talk show, people call in afterwards and they're like, hey, well, you guys are talking about Nebraska's wide receivers and quarterbacks and running backs and all that stuff, but they can't do nothing without an offensive line. Mm-hmm. And I kept trying to tell people this year, I don't think the offensive line was that bad. So I feel like I always had to be the person to calm people down about the offensive line. I always feel like I am the least dramatic person about the offensive line around here. So
nice change.
I think it should tell you that, the urgency that Nebraska was attacking the transfer portal with when it was searching for an offensive tackle in the transfer portal, and it continues to. They
got one.
Right, they got one, and they're interested in more. So I mean, you can't play football without, like, you don't have to know who it's going to be today, but this is the portal window. There's another portal window, and the pool shrinks every time that happens. And then you have to have one by the time the season starts. So, like, it might not seem like the season is here, but as it pertains to roster, building, it's the off season's, getting close to over, right? Like, you have to figure out who your guys are. So I don't know, man. Like, yeah.
Here's what Nebraska has back on the offensive line that it knows it can trust. Henry Lutovsky as a guard, Gunnar Gatula as a tackle, and Justin Evans as a guard or center, an interior lineman. That's it. The other players are unproven and have played very limited reps.
Right.
You need more than 3 linemen that you can trust going into spring football. And I think that's somewhat undisputable. Nebraska plays in the Big Ten. Like, you need offensive linemen. Like, you want to have 7 or 8 who minimum who you feel you can put into a game. And the spring is for development. And I think it's realistic to expect that a couple of those second-year players and third-year players, as they will be in 25, will make a jump in the spring and move into the category of players that you expect to be able to trust in 25. Yeah. But there have got to be more. So Nebraska last year ran the ball 3.79 yards per carry, 98th in the country. It allowed 28 sacks, 2.15 per game, 78th in the country. It scored 23 points per game, 103rd in the country. It had 6 chances to win games or force overtime with its offense on the field at the end of the fourth quarter. 0 for 5 in the regular season. Finally got it done in the bowl game by being able to run out the clock. Like, I don't think we're overreacting.
Yeah, and then just one more on Greg's point. Like, he said, the last 2 recruiting classes have included the best offensive line haul in years. I get that a couple tackles might be necessary to bridge the gap. And like, so let's talk about that part of it. I don't think that Nebraska has a general offensive line problem. Like, if we're talking about the health of the room, where, recruiting and ability to acquire players and developing and how good your coach is and how it fits in the scheme, like, I think that's all fine. But we literally are talking about the urgency at which Nebraska needs to get a couple tackles to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe we're arguing about the same thing.
The offensive line looks okay in 26 and 27. There are concerns about 2025. And the concerns are eased somewhat by the addition of Elijah Pritchett this week. One other thing that I'll say about the offensive line, when a coach expresses concern publicly about anything, because generally coaches are going to play things down. Hey, how's your quarterback situation? How do you feel about the defense this year? Coaches, they don't want to stoke panic within the fan base. They want to project confidence. So when you hear a coach who's concerned, in a very fan-like kind of way about anything within the team, I think that should raise an eyebrow. That should be reason to pay attention to that. We heard that from Dana Holgorsen in December about Nebraska's offensive linemen. As players started to come in on visits from the portal, Holgorsen was seemingly concerned or frustrated, or he was impatient with the fact that Nebraska had not yet picked up offensive linemen to add to its roster. I'll compare this to what Matt Rhule's attitude was when he was asked about the kickers in August.
Yeah.
We heard that several times. Hey, how's the kicking situation? And you expect the head coach to say in that moment, hey, we're going to be fine. We trust the guys we have in the room. Everything's going to be good going into the season. I'm not concerned about it. And, and then if things fall apart, you can say, well, that didn't go as planned. That's not what the tact that Matt Rhule took. He said, this is a concern for me. I'm not sure what we have at kicker. We need to be much better. Look how the first half of the season went with Nebraska's kickers.
No doubt about it. And so then there was like another offensive line comment from Happy Hermit on YouTube, who kind of asks a question. Bama's worst offensive lineman is now Nebraska's best offensive lineman. LOL.
Mm-hmm. Well, Elijah Pritchett was not Alabama's worst offensive lineman. Let's just get past that. He started 12 games. Like he did allow a team high 31 QB pressures. So part of that, excuse me, is that he's blocking for Jalen Milroe, who likes to hold on to the football for good reason, because he is able to scramble and get out of the pocket and run with the football. But if Jalen Milroe holds on to the football for longer than Carson Beck at another SEC school, it's going to lead to more pressures. The right tackle is not going to be able to just hold his man off for 5-6 seconds, and Milroe will roll to his right. Like I don't want to like excuse any issues that Pritchett had in pass protection, but I think some of it's related to the style of offense that he was operating in. He's a good offensive lineman. He's a dominant offensive lineman in run blocking. He is, I think we can say, Nebraska's best offensive lineman today.
Context matters. I mean, think about, Nebraska brought in Micah Mazuka last year, and everyone was like, yeah, he was a fine player at Florida or in his previous stops before that. Is like, he's fine. He ended up being Nebraska's, most, when he was out there, their most dominant, physically dominant offensive lineman. Not their most consistent, not the guy that you could trust all the time, but if you needed 2 yards at the goal line, you run behind Micah Mazuka, right? And I think it'll be the same thing with Elijah Pritchett.
Yeah, another guy that Nebraska's losing. I mentioned Scott and Benhart, but from the group in 24, Nebraska's best offensive lineman from a physical standpoint was Micah Mazuka. So he contributed to those numbers on offense that were not fantastic for the Huskers when it came to how you measure an offensive line.
All right, so let's take a time out here. We have a big question when we return from Peter. Is Matt Rhule taking a page from the Coach Prime playbook? We'll discuss after this.
All right, a message from a new sponsor of the Locked On Nebraska podcast, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by a pro. Ready for stress-free taxes? The most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today. Get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real updates apply in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Welcome back on this Friday mailbag edition of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. Connor, we had college football on Thursday night before we get back to the questions. The football was good on Thursday night. Notre Dame defeats Penn State on a field goal in the final 10 seconds of that semifinal at the Orange Bowl. Impressive from Notre Dame to come back from a first half in which it looked physically overmatched by Penn State.
Yeah, right out of the gate in the third quarter, they pretty much said the statement like, "Hey, we're playing today. We're going to figure it out in the run game." And they got things going. And then, the crucial mistake by Penn State's quarterback. I was talking about Drew Aller and how we were kind of trusting him, and Greg McElroy, who was doing the game, he was doing this whole long spiel, because they get the ball back with 30-40 seconds left. And he's like, "Hey, I think you got to be aggressive. I think you got to push it, because you got to trust Drew Aller to make the right decisions." and he makes a horrible decision. He breaks the cardinal rule. He throws late over the middle and back over, to his backside. So no good, and it set up the field goal.
Notre Dame won the middle 8. It's a portion of the game that you hear come up a lot with Nebraska and Matt Rhule. And when you win this is why when you win the coin toss, you often defer, because you want to have the ball to start the second half and have an opportunity to win the middle 8. You can still win it if you got to kick off to open the second half, but it's much more manageable to finish the first half, as Notre Dame did, by getting on the scoreboard with a field goal and then coming out and setting the tone. All of a sudden, a 10-0 deficit in a game that's looking like it could get out of hand with one more score is 10-10. And Notre Dame had all the momentum from in that moment. Not for the rest of the game. It had to wrestle it back. But great start to the CFP semifinals, and we'll get Ohio State, Texas tonight in the Cotton Bowl.
All right, let's attack this question here from Peter. It's more of a statement, but it's a good topic to sort of talk about a little bit, because I think we both have probably some pretty strong thoughts on it. Matt Rhule is finally adopting the prime playbook regarding transfers, according to Peter. Maybe a little too late, is what he says.
Yeah. So we're referring to Deion Sanders and the Colorado approach to handling the transfer portal. For context, Colorado in 2023, which was Coach Prime's first year, brought in 52 transfers. And in his second year, 2024, he brought in 43 transfers. So 95 transfers over 2 years. That's almost a comical number. And look, it paid off with Colorado winning 9 games this season. Had a Heisman Trophy winner who was one of those transfers. Had a top of the first round quarterback who was one of those transfers. Is this what Matt Rhule is doing at Nebraska?
No, Mitch, it is not. He is Matt Rhule is not taking many pages, I don't think, out of the prime playbook. And that's not like it's generally worked for Deion Sanders. Like you said, the players that he got have been, I mean, they've sort of turned things around, and they're going to now start to recruit over on top of it, right? Because of the notoriety that they have at this moment. And then that comes along with having Deion Sanders as your head coach. But Nebraska honestly still has, and maybe we oversold this when we were talking about the new way of building a roster and building a team. College football has changed, but like, I think Nebraska honestly still has like plausible deniability in saying, I just think we're filling holes. And they lost a lot of players coming off of the 2024 season, and they had to upgrade at a couple positions, no different than anybody else does. But Nebraska is taking probably at the most 20 transfers this year, not 50, and
which would be a record, which would be the most that Nebraska's ever taken. So I do think that there's a difference in what Nebraska's doing, and I do think there has been a change, as we discussed on the show Thursday. 16 transfers so far in for Nebraska. The latest was defensive back Marquise Groves Killebrew, who joined the mix on Thursday. He played at Arizona last year. He played at Louisville in 2023. He played at Texas A&M and redshirted in 2022. So
that's a lot of schools.
But he's the 4th defensive back that Nebraska's brought in. So no, I mean, even the Indiana playbook, which, is also one I think that people in the college football public know as like completely remaking your roster through the transfer portal. Indiana brought in 30 transfers in year 1 under Curt Cignetti. So Nebraska's barely over half that total right now here on January 10th. We'll probably get up to about the point of being 2/3 the way there. This is not the way that Matt Rhule is doing things, intends to do things. But I think in years, like if he has another year like this offseason, this 24-25 offseason, where you have 25, 30 players leaving through the portal, then you'll see him hit the portal hard again. If it's a year where 10 to 15 players go out from Nebraska through the portal, then I think you'll see Nebraska take more of an approach where it adds like 6 to 8, which is probably where everybody is more comfortable with.
All right, we're good on that one. We kind of unpacked that to
Yeah. I just say the other difference with the Coach Prime playbook is that Coach Prime and Deion Sanders in Colorado, they're not hitting the road recruiting high school players with anywhere near the energy that Nebraska is. This month is an opportunity for Nebraska to get out and continue recruiting the 2026 players. And you see coaches are on the road this week all over the place. So they're two different philosophies.
Should we do a couple special teams questions here back to back?
Yeah. Let's do these quick.
Here's John. Does the 105-man roster limit make it impossible for special teams coordinators to take aside 20-plus players for extended chunks of practice? Pardon my ignorance, he says, but I don't even know how many distinct special teams squads are normally used. Are there separate 11s for punt return, kickoff return? And do the best teams have minimal overlap? It's a good question. Because oftentimes we talk about special teams and we're not sure who's on them.
Yeah. They devote. No, the 105 is not going to make it impossible for a special teams coordinator to take players aside and have a special teams portion of practice, because they're going to focus, and they have. Nebraska does special teams at the beginning of practice. And if you're a defensive player on special teams, then you're focused on special teams when they're doing special teams. Like it's a separate part of practice. It obviously incorporates offensive and defensive players and the specialists who are only a part of that unit. As far as the overlap, there are some players who are on all four of the primary special teams units. That doesn't include like field goal team, extra point team. But and then there are others who are on two. There are some who are just on one. I don't think that there are trends like good teams or the best teams. Like Notre Dame right now has probably got the best special teams going, certainly of the teams that are left playing in college football. But I think even if you look around the country, and I don't think that there's a correlation between having players who play two special teams or four special teams. And then that relating to success. It's more about how devoted are you as a team, as a program, to that part of your operation.
Yeah, you want to see what are the best teams, the teams who are known for being the best at it, what are they doing right? And the answer is it's not easy to directly see. It's almost more of a culture thing than anything.
It is.
It's just like we have to do this year over year over year. We have to emphasize its importance and then be good at it, right? And Notre Dame, has been one of those teams for a while. And then from Vincent Napa on special teams, I will consider it progress if podcast hosts or radio hosts or writers are not spending time talking about the failures of Nebraska special teams next year. Am I lowering the bar too far? What timeline do you anticipate that Nebraska will hire its special teams coordinator?
On the second part, I think by the end of the month, it's realistic. There's not a whole lot of reason to wait beyond that. All football is going to be done being played at the college and NFL level here in a few weeks. NFL playoffs just getting started this week, but once teams are done, you should have the guy in place, and there's time to have conversations. If Matt Rhule is choosing to want to do a search, cast a wide net, he can have conversations at the AFCA coaches convention in Charlotte, which opens up this weekend. I don't know if that's his plan, but we're still not hearing a ton as far as what's happening on that search from the inside of the program. But I expect that to pick up over the coming days. And yeah, I agree with you, Vince. If we're not talking about it a lot, then that means it's in a better place.
All right, Mitch, let's take a quick break here. We still have a couple questions we can wrap up and look ahead to the weekend a little bit. Coming back on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. But first, from big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with the FanDuel Sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose, with FanDuel. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need. You can place live bets on the NFL, and there is absolutely no better time to do it right now. I'll throw one in here. So I'm gonna probably place this one myself. My guy this year in the NFL, he was on my fantasy team, Ladd McConkey. I love Ladd McConkey. And so Ladd McConkey on
Rookie.
the FanDuel Sportsbook it's the first playoff game of the weekend, Saturday at 3:30, plus 140 for an anytime touchdown. That seems like a solid bet to me. Bet on Ladd McConkey with the FanDuel Sportsbook. And once again, it doesn't take much investment. $5 and you get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. And it's super easy to find and easy to get yourself involved. Head to FanDuel.com and join today. And once again, get started with $200 in bonus bets. Head to FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you. Nebraska basketball is on the road at Mackey in West Lafayette, Indiana this Sunday, a place where they have never won. Tough. 0 times. 0-8 all time.
Tough assignment coming off of a overtime loss.
Yep. So we'll see if they're able to get off the schneid a little bit coming off their loss against Iowa. Other than that, I mean, I don't have any basketball games to be at this weekend. The teams are on the road generally. So like I'm chilling, Mitch.
You're just going to watch a lot of football.
I'm going to watch football all day on Sunday. Yeah. And Saturday.
Tonight, football, definitely football.
Football as well.
Sunday's NFL playoff games are better than Saturdays, I think, but you got Nebraska basketball to watch also on Sunday. My son, the 8th grader, he fell asleep on the couch in the first quarter of the CFP game last night. This is an unusual. I think he's been up playing college football 25, which he now enjoys in the home. Too late at night on recent nights, and he fell asleep on the couch last night in the first quarter. I think when it was 3-0, and that was it. He was out for the. Wow. He woke up at some point and stumbled to bed, very unlike him, and he missed the whole game. So I told him this morning what a disappointment it was that I didn't get to watch the end of the game with him, and I think he was just disgusted in himself, as he should be.
One of the best games of the playoff era. Certainly the best game of the, well, I don't know about certainly. I guess there was Texas, Arizona State, but top 2 games of the 12-team playoff era. We could already start to make our lists. That semifinal last night for sure.
We'll be staying up late tonight, though. No
Good
worries about that.
All right, let's get to just 1 or 2 more questions before we get out of here. Here's Chris, who left a comment on YouTube. Whatever happened to the player that just showed up to Nebraska with experience? He enrolled and said, "Hey, I can play football. I don't remember the position or what school he came from." I have actually thought about this person a lot, and I'm glad that we're mentioning him. Mitch, do you remember that person?
Yeah. So the funny thing is, when I was reading Chris's question at first, before I got to the last sentence, I was like, is she just talking in general about whatever happened to players at Nebraska who just showed up and walked onto the team? Like, or what are we talking about here? Like, did this happen in the 50s or 60s? But he's referring to Mac Markway, the tight end from LSU, who oddly came into the fold at Nebraska after the season had started. And this is a guy with experience out of St. Louis. Must have heard that things were good up in Lincoln, and he walked into literally walked into the Osborne Legacy Complex and said, "Hey, I can play football," just like Chris described it. Well, he was injured in knee.
He was like, "Yeah, I went to LSU."
They watched some film. Said, "Yeah, okay, you can come on out to practice, Mac." I believe he got into a game. I believe he got into one game, and then in the end of the non-conference or beginning of Big Ten season.
Really? I thought he got hurt before the season started. Really?
No, I believe he was either getting ready to play in his first game and they were going to use him, or he got a couple of reps in a game. And it was in the season when Mac hurt his knee. And so he was out for the year, torn ACL, and he'll be back. I think the expectation is that it was early enough in the season that they should have him back, at least ready to do some work in spring football. And he's a big part of what they have at tight end. Yeah. Notice Nebraska didn't do anything in the portal at tight end.
Not a bad piece to have, that's for sure. I mean, I do think they like Luke Lindenmeyer. So they'll have that piece.
Heinrich Harburg, Carter Nelson.
Forgot about those guys. Yeah. So I think they do like what they have at the tight end position.
Markway tore his ACL the week before the Colorado game.
Okay.
Week
So
after the season
first week.
opener.
Yep.
Yeah, I think he was set to play. Like they were going to get him. They were going to get him in. He must have come in toward the end of camp, and so before the season, and they were going to get him. They were going to get him into that Colorado game. At least that was the talk leading up to that game, but it never happened because of the knee injury.
All right. One more, a suggestion from Jaden, who emailed us, lockedonneb@gmail.com. So he was listening and he realized that we were having a difficult time because we had a tie in the Nebraska pick standings this year. We both went 6-6-1, and we were talking about how we break this tie and what sort of, long-term bet we have. So his suggestion is this: you guys could bet how many defensive backs are left in the room after the spring.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, aren't we at 30 right now? So I like to keep somewhat of a scholarship distribution here, but I can't tell you that it's completely accurate at the moment.
Yeah, so I've got it. There are 25 returning defensive backs, and they've taken, and that includes the freshman who signed in December. And then as of Thursday, they have taken 4. So from the portal. So it's 29 right now. 29 out of 105 in the secondary. The math does not add up. So I like this. I like this idea, but I think that we pick the number as it's going to be when the 105 is set, because the 105, after the spring, but like right after the spring, they're not going to be at 105. It's going to take a little time to reduce the roster down to the number that you go into the season with. So how about we pick a number right now that we think Nebraska will have for DBs when they get to 105, which essentially is in July. But we'll just put it August 1st. So the beginning week of camp. And we could, if we want, we could do this with the wide receivers too. So we don't end up so we're less likely to end up with another tie. So the wide receivers are at 16 right now, including the 3 who've portaled in.
All right. So D-backs first. We're at 29. Let's say, I don't want to undershoot it. Let's say 21. They end up with 21 by the time we settle in.
Okay, so we're not going to play Price is Right rules here. We're gonna go with closest to. If you go over that, that's okay, because I think you're over, and I don't want to eliminate you off the bat. I'm going to say 16 at Nebraska. That's a huge number to cut. Actually, I'm going to say 17. Mitch says 17. I'm, and I haven't gone through and done the exercise of saying, all right, you're going to have 4 quarterbacks, you're going to have 6 running backs. And would probably be advisable to do if you want to get to the DBs and start adding it up to 105. But 17 DBs to me is interesting, is reasonable.
I count 18. I count 18 names right now that are scholarship caliber guys.
Yeah. Some of them are going to go. Some of them are going to choose to go because what they see for their playing time.
Interesting. Okay. Well,
all right. Let's go wide receivers. Remember that 13 returning, and then you have 3 who've come in from the portal, and there might be another coming in from the portal.
So 16. So let's say 12.
Yeah. Okay. I like you saying 12.
Yeah.
I was going to say that, but I'm going to have to go with something different. So I'll say 11. Mitch says 11.
And I'm looking at 11 names right now that would be categorized as wide receivers that are scholarship caliber players. And I guess I don't have the newest.
There's 3 more.
Well,
I
have Key, Hunter, and Gilmore, but they get another one.
Jonah Wilson is expected to join the class, unless he did. Unless maybe he did during the Notre Dame game last night, and I spaced it off. But yeah, Jonah Wilson from Houston is a possibility to still come in. So you say 12, I say 11. All right, I'm going to file that away, and we'll check back on August 1st.
Okay, what a game! All right, that's it for us. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. We appreciate you listening to the podcast as always. And we invite you to make the Locked On Big Ten podcast your second listen of the day as well. You can find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.